Welcome, curious learners. Today, we're taking a journey, a deep dive, really, into the orbit of our closest celestial companion. You sent us a fascinating stack of sources, truly fascinating, and our mission today is to unpack some of the most enduring secrets, the scientific oddities, and, yeah, some outright strange theories surrounding the moon. Every night, it watches us silent, silver, and still, sometimes full, sometimes gone, but always there. Our tides obey it, our stories orbit it, our dreams reach toward it. Yet the more we study the moon, the less we seem to understand.
Exactly. On this deep dive, we're looking beyond, the usual craters and dust. We'll explore the geological enigmas that, well, they defy easy explanation, and the unusual orbital characteristics that seem almost too perfect. Plus, ancient legends hinting at a different past, some really intriguing origin theories, and yeah, we'll even dive into the controversies around human exploration.
That's quite a list. What strikes me right off the bat is how, for something we see almost every single night, the moon just seems to hold so many unresolved questions, more questions than answers, maybe. So, where do we even begin to unpack all this?
I think we should start literally from the ground up, the moon's surface and its interior, because that's where some of the most puzzling observations really kick off.
Okay, sounds good. Like, take the moon's soil. It's not just inert dust, is it? I read it can actually spark with
Yes.
electric charges.
That's right. Even in those permanently shadowed, incredibly cold craters near the poles. NASA's crater instrument, it's aboard the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, discovered these charges build up faster than they can dissipate. And it's not just a weird little quirk. It suggests a much more dynamic surface environment than we thought, and honestly, it could even affect how we plan future lunar bases.
And that connects to magnetism, doesn't it? Because the moon isn't supposed to have a strong magnetic field now, but some rocks suggest it did.
Precisely. We have Apollo samples indicating a powerful field existed once, yet, many other rocks show no sign of it at all. It's inconsistent. The leading hypothesis involves titanium sort of cooling and sinking inside the moon, creating intermittent fields. But it's still very much an open question. It tells us the moon's interior isn't behaving quite like we'd expect.
And it gets weirder on the surface, too, right? These
Yeah.
lunar swirls.
Ah, yes. The swirls, these patches of really bright, highly reflective material, often right next to very dark patches. They look almost painted on. But the weirdest part, they don't always line up with magnetic anomalies, even seemingly identical ones. And get this, some are antipodal,
Antipodal, meaning
they are directly linked to huge impact craters on the exact opposite side of the moon. Imagine a massive impact, like throwing a rock into a pond, but the main ripple effect shows up precisely halfway around the sphere. It's bizarre. Theories. Maybe cometary impacts hitting just right, or maybe electric fields somehow sorting and redepositing the dust. Nobody knows for sure.
okay, that's strange. And below the surface, you mentioned volcanic activity.
Yeah, evidence suggests the moon was once highly volcanic, and maybe, just maybe, there's still some magma activity deep down. This could potentially explain something called transient lunar phenomena, or TLPs.
TLPs, those are the flashes people report seeing.
Bright flashes, glows, sometimes hazy patches. They've been observed for centuries, briefly appearing on the lunar surface, like Posidonius crater. Back in 1791, it was reported as fully internally lit. Then, in 1898, an unshadowed crater lit inside it. A bright spot in 1905. A hazy, obscured area in 1968. These aren't just fleeting lights. They imply active processes, maybe trapped gases venting to the surface, that kind of thing.
And then there are the mascons. What are those?
Mass concentrations. Basically huge, unusually dense areas hidden beneath the lunar seas, the dark plains you see. They're so dense they actually distort the moon's gravitational field in those areas. Spacecraft orbits dip slightly when they pass over them.
Huh. And did you mention something about the craters being shallow?
That's another puzzle. Lunar craters, even massive ones, tend to stop at surprisingly shallow depths, usually no more than a couple of miles deep. It hints that below the loose surface layer, there's something much harder, almost like an impenetrable inner shell.
Which leads us to the ringing like a bell thing.
Ah, yes. Apollo 12. The astronauts intentionally crashed their ascent stage module back onto the moon after they left, and the seismometers they'd left behind. They recorded the moon vibrating, ringing for over an hour. Not like earthquakes, which dampen quickly. This immediately sparks speculation. Maybe the moon's hollow. or has large caverns. A theory that got a little boost when a later, still classified Apollo 17 project was apparently codenamed Chapel Bell.
Chapel Bell. Interesting.
And it all ties into the moon's overall density. It's suspiciously uniform, which is odd in itself, but even stranger, its interior seems less dense than its outer parts. That's the complete opposite of Earth, Mars, pretty much every other rocky body we know, where the heavier stuff sinks to the core.
So if Earth is like a layered cake,
The moon is more like, yeah, maybe a hollow chocolate egg. Or at least an egg where the yolk is lighter than the shell. And some theories even push it further, suggesting the soil and dust on the surface might actually be older than the rocks inside the moon.
older. How could that even work?
Well, it would only really make sense if the interior was somehow processed, maybe mined out, and the older original material brought to the surface. It's way out there, but it fits some of the weird data. And this strange shell, this outer layer, might be hiding valuable stuff too. Titanium, zirconium, significant reserves of helium-3.
Helium-3, that's the potential fusion fuel.
Right, exactly. Accumulated from billions of years of solar wind hitting the surface. So you put all these geological quirks together, it really forces you to ask, how on Earth or off Earth did this thing form?
Right, the origin story. Because if the geology is this weird, the formation must be too. And the standard explanations aren't perfect, are they?
Not by a long shot. They all have pretty significant problems, like the capture theory, the moon just drifting by and getting caught in Earth's gravity. The physics required are considered, well, almost impossible. The orbital mechanics just don't work easily. Then there's the accretion theory, Earth and moon forming together from the same cloud of dust and gas.
But if that were true, they should be more alike, shouldn't they? Like having similar iron cores, similar spin.
Exactly, and they don't. The moon lacks a substantial iron core like Earth's. Then you have the old fission hypothesis that the early Earth spun so fast it flung a chunk of itself out, maybe from the Pacific Ocean basin.
That one sounds dramatic.
It does, but the moon rocks are much older than Earth's ocean floor, so that doesn't really fit either.
Okay, so that leaves the main contender, the giant impact theory.
Right, the idea that a Mars-sized object, sometimes called Theia, smashed into the proto-Earth billions of years ago. The resulting debris cloud then coalesced to form the moon. This is the most widely accepted theory today, but even it requires a very specific, almost too perfect set of impact conditions, the right size, the right angle, the right speed. The odds, some scientists say, are astronomical for it to work out exactly as needed to produce the Earth-Moon system we see.
So even the best theory has issues. Are there newer ideas?
There are. One gaining some traction is the synestia hypothesis. It's sort of a modified impact idea. Instead of just debris, the collision was so energetic it basically vaporized much of the proto-Earth and the impactor into a huge, rapidly spinning donut-shaped structure of molten rock and gas, synestia. And the moon then formed from material condensing within this donut at its cooler outer edge.
A giant space donut.
Okay.
It shows scientists are still really grappling with this, trying to find something that fits all the weirdness.
Absolutely, because beyond the formation, the moon itself, just sitting there in orbit is, well, it's bizarre. Its size, first off, it's a quarter of Earth's diameter. That moon-to-planet size ratio is enormous, completely unique in our solar system. We haven't found anything like it anywhere else. Pluto and Charon come close, but they're often called a double dwarf planet system because they're more evenly matched.
And its orbit is weird, too.
Very. It's nearly perfectly circular. Most moons have more elliptical, oval-shaped orbits. A near-perfect circle is highly unusual for a captured or even co-formed body. And you mentioned the barycenter, the center of mass for the Earth-Moon system. It's actually located inside the Earth.
Right, so the moon orbits a point inside the Earth.
Yes, which means mathematically there should be a noticeable wobble in the moon's orbit as it goes around this internal point. But the actual wobble is much, much smaller than expected. It's oddly stable.
And then there's the eclipse thing.
Ah, yes. The unbelievable coincidence. From our perspective on Earth, the moon appears almost exactly the same size in the sky as the sun. This is only possible because the sun is about 400 times farther away from us than the moon, and it just happens to also be about 400 times larger in diameter.
That perfect alignment allows for total solar eclipses.
Precisely. Where the moon perfectly blocks out the sun's disk, many scientists just shrug and call it an amazing coincidence, but it is statistically improbable, let's say.
And we always see the same face, right? Tidal locking.
Yes. The moon rotates on its axis in exactly the same amount of time it takes to orbit the Earth. So one side always faces us. while tidal locking happens elsewhere. Achieving it so perfectly with such a large moon relative to its planet adds another layer of peculiarity.
And finally, it stabilizes Earth.
Critically so. The moon's gravity stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, preventing wild swings that would cause catastrophic climate changes. It also helps regulate our spin rate and tides. Many argue that without the moon, complex life might never have developed or survived on Earth.
So you've got the weird geology, the problematic origin stories, the bizarre size, the perfect orbit, the perfect eclipses, the tidal locking, the stabilization. It really does feel like too perfect to be random.
Or maybe, we just won the astronomical lottery, an incredible series of fortunate events. But when you stack up that many coincidences, it does make you wonder if there's more to the story.
Which maybe explains why ancient cultures had their own strange stories about it, stories that don't always match the scientific timeline.
Exactly. If the science is puzzling, maybe the old legends hold some clues, or at least reflect a deep, persistent mystery. And this is where it gets really interesting, even a bit unsettling.
Tell me more.
Well, you have ancient Greek and Roman writers like Aristotle and Plutarch back in the 5th century BC talking about a people called the Proselenes.
Proselenes, meaning?
Before the moon. They supposedly lived in Arcadia, in Greece, and claimed their ancestors were there since before there was a moon in the heavens.
Before the moon. Wow.
And it's not just Greece. Halfway around the world, in Bolivia, the ancient culture of Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca, their symbols and legends also apparently refer to a time when the sky had no moon.
Huh. Two very different cultures, same idea.
And then there's the Zulu tradition from southern Africa. Their legends, passed down orally, claim the moon was actually brought here, placed in orbit around the Earth.
Placed in orbit. By whom and when?
The legends are vague on the who, but some interpretations of Zulu shamanic lore, like the writings of Credo Mutwa, suggest it happened relatively recently, maybe around 11,000 years ago.
11,000 years.
Yeah.
That's geologically recent. And that time frame lines up with what?
It lines up interestingly with the end of the last ice age and the Younger Dryas period, a time of massive, sudden climate shifts, sea level rise, and extinctions on Earth. Some of these legends even suggest the moon was dragged here from somewhere else and its arrival caused cataclysms.
So the moon as a late arrival, in addition to the Earth system, not part of its original formation. If that were true,
Wow.
that rewrites our entire sky story.
It certainly does.
And maybe our whole timeline too.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we entertain that wild idea of the moon arriving later, then what exactly arrived? This sounds like it leads into even stranger territory.
It does, because if it wasn't formed naturally with Earth and wasn't captured in the usual sense, then what? This brings us to a really provocative theory proposed back in 1970 by two Soviet scientists, Michael Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov.
Soviet scientists, what did they propose?
They published an article titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" They argued, based on many of the geological and orbital oddities we've discussed, that the moon might not be a natural body at all.
Not natural. Meaning
Artificial. They suggested the moon could be a huge, hollow spacecraft constructed by some advanced civilization and brought here, placed into orbit, a long, long time ago.
a spaceship moon. That's okay.
Nice.
That's a big leap. Did they acknowledge how out there that sounded?
Oh, absolutely. They knew it sounded like science fiction. But they argued it was the only logical conclusion that could potentially explain all the combined anomalies. The low overall density, the apparently denser outer shell, the shallow craters stopping abruptly, the long seismic reverberations, the ringing like a bell suggesting a hollow or structured interior.
So the spaceship moon theory actually explains some of the weird data.
It potentially could, yes. It offers a framework, however outlandish, that addresses multiple puzzles at once. The weird density profile, less dense inside, denser outside, makes sense if it's an engineered structure with a strong outer hull and a less dense, perhaps largely empty or differently utilized, interior. And the presence of certain elements in high concentrations on the surface, like titanium, uranium-236, neptunium-237, stuff that's relatively rare on Earth but great for structural integrity or advanced tech.
That adds fuel to the fire if you assume the interior was maybe mined out and the processed materials were used for the shell or brought to the surface.
Exactly. It fits that narrative. And interestingly, some interpretations of those ancient legends we mentioned align with the moon as an artificial object, a chariot of the gods, a monitoring station, or even a kind of ark or vessel.
So according to this theory, it's not just hollow, it's a hangar. Or some kind of massive
Well,
base.
or maybe even something stranger, like a hologram or projection, as some fringes suggest. Depends who you ask, really. But the core Soviet idea was a physical, hollow structure.
Okay, if we even just entertain that possibility for a second, the obvious questions are huge. Who built it and why?
Those are the billion-dollar questions, aren't they? And the theory provides no answers, only speculation. But it leads us to the next layer of lunar mystery. If the moon is artificial, or even just hiding secrets naturally, what might actually be on it? Especially on the far side, the side we never see from Earth?
Right, the dark side, though it's not actually dark, it gets sunlight.
It does.
Just hidden from us.
Yeah.
And the rumors about what's there are pretty wild.
They really are. Take Carl Wolf, for instance. He was a former U.S. Air Force sergeant who worked with NSA clearances at Langley Air Force Base. He claimed that back in the late 1960s, he was shown classified photographs taken by NASA's Lunar Orbiter missions, specifically images supposedly from Lunar Orbiter 5 in 1967.
And what did he claim to see in these photos?
He described seeing clear evidence of artificial structures on the far side. Large bases, he called them. He talked about geometric shapes, towers, large spherical buildings, even structures that looked like radar dishes, things that looked clearly manufactured, not natural formations.
And Lunar Orbiter 5, wasn't that specifically scouting landing sites for Apollo?
It was. And intriguingly, some researchers point out that the mission's publicly released photographic coverage seems to have mysteriously skipped or poorly imaged certain areas that other data suggested were of high interest, areas where Wolf claimed these structures were located.
And others have claimed to see things in official NASA photos too, right? Like Richard Hoagland.
Yes, Hoagland, a former NASA consultant and science writer, has spent decades analyzing NASA imagery, particularly from the Moon and Mars. He claims that by using contrast enhancement and other techniques on official photos, you can reveal structures showing unnatural geometry, perfect right angles, grid patterns, things that he argues couldn't possibly form naturally. He points to specific examples like what he calls a monumental monolith and a towering structure several miles high he dubbed the Shard in certain lunar images.
Okay, photo analysis can be tricky, subjective, but then you have the remote viewers.
Right. This delves into the classified world of U.S. military intelligence programs like Project Stargate, which explored psychic phenomena, including remote viewing, essentially, trying to see distant locations mentally. Ingo Swann, one of the most famous participants in Stargate, claimed he was tasked with remote viewing the moon. He reported seeing structures, lights, evidence of activity, and even what he interpreted as an alien base on the far side.
And he wasn't the only one.
Apparently not. Reports suggest many other remote viewers involved in Stargate also described seeing things like domes, hangars, tall towers, and active machinery on the moon, particularly on the far side.
Add to that some cryptic comments from astronauts themselves.
Like Buzz Aldrin. He's made some intriguing, if vague, comments over the years. He famously spoke about a monolith on Mars's moon Phobos, questioning if it was natural or artificial, and he's hinted that the moon holds secrets, suggesting we should go back there and find out what really is there. Some interpret these comments, along with supposed whispers or censored communications from other Apollo missions, as hints that astronauts saw things they couldn't talk about, installations built by others, long before us.
And then there's the Soviet side. You mentioned their probes.
Yes, several Soviet lunar probes, like Luna 15 back in 1969, which was racing Apollo 11 to get moon rocks and crashed, experienced mysterious failures, often when approaching specific regions. Regions that some researchers, like Hoagland and others, claim contain evidence of these alleged artificial structures. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not.
Which feeds into that conspiracy theory about the space race ending.
Exactly. The theory suggests the abrupt cooling of the U.S.-Soviet space race in the mid-70s, the cancellation of later Apollo missions, the shift away from ambitious lunar goals by both superpowers wasn't just about budgets or politics. Instead, it proposes they both made a discovery on the moon, perhaps evidence of prior or current non-human activity that was so profound, so potentially destabilizing, that they mutually agreed to back off and keep it secret from the world population.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. Too wild to believe, maybe. But like you said, some of the details are too specific, too persistent to just ignore completely.
It raises that crucial question. If any of this is true, why the secrecy? Why are these alleged structures always just beyond the reach of clear, undeniable public confirmation?
Always. Just out of reach. And speaking of things just out of reach or things people claim are hidden, no deep dive into the moon would be complete without tackling the moon landing controversies, right? The Apollo missions themselves. For a lot of people, this is where the skepticism really bites hard.
Absolutely. It's a persistent belief for some. The core motive proposed by skeptics usually centers on the Cold War. The intense pressure of the space race, the need for the U.S. to score a decisive propaganda victory over the Soviet Union. The argument goes, if actually landing humans on the moon by the end of the 1960s proved too difficult, too dangerous, or maybe even impossible with the technology then, faking it would have been a powerful alternative to win the race.
And they point to specific technical challenges as evidence it couldn't have been done, like the Van Allen belts.
That's a big one, yes. The Van Allen radiation belts are zones of intense charged particle radiation trapped by Earth's magnetic field. Critics argue that astronauts couldn't possibly have survived the transit through them without lethal doses of radiation, given the spacecraft's relatively thin shielding.
What's NASA's explanation for that?
NASA states the Apollo trajectories were carefully chosen to pass through the thinnest parts of the belts, and crucially, the spacecraft were moving incredibly fast, nearly 39,000 kilometers per hour after leaving Earth orbit. This meant the time spent in the most intense regions was very short, just a few minutes, with the total transit taking less than half an hour outbound. They calculate the resulting radiation dose was well within safe limits for astronauts.
But critics still question the shielding.
They do. They point out the thin aluminum hull of the command module, and they also note that a high-altitude U.S. nuclear test in 1962 called Operation Starfish Prime actually intensified the Van Allen belts for a while, making them even more radioactive during the period leading up to Apollo. They argue NASA downplays the true radiation risk.
Okay, what other points do skeptics raise? The lunar modules themselves.
Yes, their appearance. Critics often point to how fragile the lunar modules looked, with descriptions like walls thinner than a soda can covered in foil. They question how such a flimsy-looking craft could survive the vacuum, radiation, micrometeoroids, and the landing itself. NASA explains the design prioritized extreme lightweight materials for the one-way trip down and up in low gravity, with vital systems protected internally.
And then there's the Stanley Kubrick connection.
Ah, the Kubrick theory. The idea that NASA secretly hired filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, hot off his incredibly realistic space visuals in 2001, A Space Odyssey, released in 1968, to direct and film fake moon landing footage in a studio just in case the real missions failed or couldn't launch. This is widely considered a baseless conspiracy theory, often traced back to a mockumentary, but it just refuses to die in popular culture.
Right, and the photos.
Yeah.
The missing stars.
A classic question. Why are there no stars visible in the photos taken on the moon's surface, especially since there's no atmosphere to obscure them? The explanation is basic photography. It was daytime on the moon during the Apollo landings. The lunar surface, lit by the full sun, was incredibly bright. The cameras had to be set with fast shutter speeds and small apertures to avoid overexposing the landscape and the astronauts. These settings were far too short dark to capture the relatively faint light of distant stars. It's the same reason you can't see stars during the day on Earth, even though they're still there. Astronauts confirmed that they couldn't see stars with the naked eye in the lunar daylight either.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the waving flag? In a vacuum.
Another famous one. The photos show the American flag looking like it's waving or rippling, which shouldn't happen in the airless environment of the moon. The simple answer is the flag was mounted on a telescopic pole with a horizontal bar along the top edge, specifically designed to make it hang unfurled and look somewhat proper for the photos rather than just hanging limp. Any wrinkles or folds in the fabric from being packed, combined with slight movements during deployment, would make it look ruffled. Without air resistance to dampen motion, any sway imparted while setting it up would persist for a while. Mythbusters actually demonstrated this quite effectively.
And the astronauts' movements. Looking bouncy or wired.
That's down to the moon's gravity being only 1/6 that of Earth's. Hopping or bounding was simply a more efficient way to move around in the bulky suits under low gravity. Our intuition about movement is calibrated for Earth. Seeing movement in 1/6 g naturally looks unreal or staged to us.
Okay, so there are explanations for many of these visual anomalies, but the big question remains for skeptics. If we went then, why haven't we been back? Why did Apollo stop after Apollo 17 in 1972?
That's probably the most potent point for lingering doubt. Critics often suggest the real reason was secrecy. Maybe they discovered something they couldn't reveal, or maybe the initial landings were faked and the program was ended before the hoax could be exposed.
And the official reasons.
Primarily cost and waning political and public interest. The Apollo program was incredibly expensive, estimated at over $250 billion in today's money. That's roughly $1 billion per mission launched by the Saturn V in today's dollars. NASA's budget peaked during the mid-60s race to the moon, reaching over 5% of the entire U.S. federal budget. By the early 70s, with the race won, attention shifted to the Vietnam War, domestic issues like poverty, and the perceived risks after the Apollo 13 accident. Budgets were slashed dramatically, leading directly to the cancellation of Apollo 18, 19, and 20, even though the hardware was mostly built.
I mean, going back now seems harder.
It certainly seems that way. Modern efforts, like NASA's Artemis program aiming to return humans to the moon, or SpaceX's Starship ambitions, are proving to be enormously complex and expensive undertakings, requiring new technologies and massive rockets. Even recent robotic successes like India's Chandrayaan-3 landing near the South Pole, or China's plans for astronauts by 2030, highlight the ongoing difficulty.
So we supposedly made it with 1960s tech, slide rules, and computers less powerful than a smartphone.
And now we need cutting-edge, multi-billion-dollar rockets, complex orbital mechanics, maybe even multiple refueling trips for missions like Starship. That apparent discrepancy fuels the skepticism. Some even claim key technology was lost, pointing to things like NASA taping over some original Apollo data tapes, or the fact the massive Saturn V rockets and their blueprints were essentially dismantled or destroyed, making them hard to simply recreate.
But there is evidence for the landings, right? Independent evidence.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And this is crucial. Perhaps the strongest evidence comes from NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, which has been mapping the moon in high resolution since 2009. LRO has captured clear images of the Apollo landing sites. You can see the descent stages of the lunar modules left behind, scientific instruments, footprints, and even the tracks made by the lunar rovers. These images match precisely with the locations and activities documented during the original missions. And importantly, the LRO camera system, LROC, is managed by a team from Arizona State University and other institutions, including international partners like the German Airspace Center, DLR, contributing to data analysis, providing a strong element of third-party verification. It's hard to argue that multiple international teams are all somehow faking those images today.
Okay, so weighing it all up, the mysteries, the theories, the controversies.
Yeah.
Where does that leave us as we wrap up this deep dive? It feels like the moon just keeps throwing curveballs.
It really does. It remains this object of profound fascination, but also, unending mystery.
The moon is many things: stabilizer, satellite, symbol. But the more we learn, the more it pushes back with silence, shadows, and echoes that last for hours. Whether it's a product of cosmic chance or cosmic design, one thing is clear. One thing is clear. The moon isn't just out there. One thing is clear. It's watching.
Beautifully put. It continues to challenge our neat scientific models, doesn't it? It ignites our imagination with these ancient, persistent legends, and it fuels these really difficult questions about what's truly out there in the cosmos, and maybe even questions about our own history and capabilities. That constant tension, that balance between rigorous scientific curiosity and this wide-open sense of mystery, that's what makes the moon so endlessly captivating, I think.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? Maybe it just means the next time you look up at that familiar silver face in the night sky, you see it with a renewed sense of wonder, knowing that even our closest celestial neighbor, the one we think we know so well, holds secrets far deeper, stranger, and more profound than we might currently imagine. Thank you for being on this deep dive with us. Stay curious, stay grounded, and stay tuned for the next one.